So this is a Startup Grind Boston event. Startup Grind itself is an organization that was founded in Silicon Valley just about 11 years ago. It was started as a meetup group. The founder, Derek Anderson, he was running a startup of his own. He wanted to learn from other experts, everything from founders, investors, experts in different professions and supporters of the startup community, bringing them into fireside chats, workshops, panel events, and really setting a place where everyone could meet. They could learn from these experts and he would learn along with them. So it started as a small meetup group in Silicon Valley, expanded pretty quickly, and turned into chapters replicating that model around the world. And today there's 500 different chapters across the Startup Grind ecosystem in various countries, university chapters, and small and large cities and towns across the world. And every year we come together for the Startup Grind Global Conference, either in Silicon Valley or virtually. And there's also other regional conferences throughout the year as well. And yeah, we're really excited to host the Boston chapter. You might be tuning in from other locations around the world as well. But yeah, we host fireside chats, workshops, panel events, and networking sessions, both virtually and in person. And really excited to have Ben Wolf as our featured speaker tonight. We're supported by a lot of great sponsors and partners as well that are all serving and supporting the startup ecosystem. Our two main sponsors here in Boston are Brex, which is a corporate credit card for startups. And they also have a cash program to manage digitally your bank account and other expenses. And ShipQuid, which is a system to help your team get on the same page and manage all the people, all the prospects and customer relationship support for your company and business. And a lot of other great partners. You can check out the resources on our Startup Grind Boston page. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. But with that, yeah, really excited for tonight's topic. We've had a lot of interest in learning more about fractional leadership, what it means to hire, when you should even think about hiring somebody in a part-time versus full-time role, and what it means to be a fractional leader of multiple companies. So excited. Ben Wolf is an expert on this topic. He wrote a book, you can see it behind him there, called Fractional Leadership, and he has a company by the same name as well that supports other businesses in learning his approach and managing their hiring process. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna turn over the stage to Ben, and I'll be managing. Yev and I, we're the co-founders, co-directors of the Boston chapter. We're going to be managing the chat, and feel free to ask questions in there along the way. And Ben's going to run his presentation. So yeah, really excited to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks, Yev, for the invitation, for having me. Hope that what I'm able to share today can add value for people. Please do put questions in the chat or any points, and definitely make sure we'd love to steer the conversation in a way that's most relevant for the people who are on tonight. So please put stuff in the chat, as Jason said, and he's going to moderate that, make sure I see it, or we pipe in with any questions, or we could save it for a conversation at the end. There's really a lot of good conversations that can jump off from this conversation. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen now for a little bit of a slideshow on this topic. So we're going to be talking about landing executive talent that you thought was out of reach, fractional leadership. The way I thought it would be best to get into this topic is to use the following agenda to really get to understand it better, which is, number one, start with my background and kind of my story and how I stumbled upon this concept. Discuss this concept I call the Entrepreneurial Catch 22, that you hit at some point, after you pass the startup phase and looking in the scale-up phase. This Entrepreneurial Catch 22 concept I'm going to discuss. I'm going to discuss what the heck is fractional leadership. It's not a concept everybody's heard of. And even those who have heard of it are not sure that it's like a real thing that people do. So just kind of explain the concept, and we're going to discuss how it works. Is it for you? How to find the right fractional leader, if that's something you want to do, if that's something that is the right fit for you. And so without any further ado, I'm going to go into my background, which is, first of all, just from an entrepreneurial point of view, a little bit unusual. I started off as a corporate restructuring and bankruptcy attorney at one of the big firms in New York City. Happy to be not doing that anymore. Through a very interesting series of events, I ended up making a left turn and then finding myself at a startup. It was called Freedom Care. It was a healthcare startup, very tech-oriented, very idealistic. And I was the first full-time employee. And just, super fast version of our history there is, I joined pre-launch, joined the founder, and helped build most of their operations. And by the time I left, I was the first full-time employee pre-launch. Had no revenue at that time. And by the time I left, we were, I don't want to mention the revenues recorded here, but we were the largest organization of our type in New York State and had over 130 employees by that time. It's continued growing. It's much bigger now. And so that was that phase of growth, but it wasn't, as any of you know, if you have a business, whether you're a solopreneur or you've started to build your startup into a little bit more of a larger business, at the stage, nothing is smooth, nothing is easy. So we had a lot of challenges along the way, and some of these, and this is kind of like a setup also to understand the concept of fractional leadership, because it's where I started to get a feel for some of the pain points that we hit at this entrepreneurial catch 22. So, one of the points is that, like all of us on the leadership, first it was just me and the founder, and then we added a couple other leaders and obviously a lot of other team members. And we were all wearing all the hats. Like, there was no clear division. And in startup mode, it has to be that way. Like that's why you're successful. And when I say successful, it's the only way that you survive startup phase is by having, profound flexibility, lack of structure. And when you're very small and a small team, you can do that. It doesn't make things stop. In fact, it makes things possible to continue and survive. But, at a certain phase, you get 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 team members, and that starts to get overly complicated. And like I said, we went from 1 to over 130 people. I'll just give you a couple of examples of the kind of roadblocks we started to hit as we grew. One of them is in marketing, reference on the screen here. Marketing, I'll just give you one example is that we tried to set up electronic systems and automation for tracking where our leads were coming from so that we can make educated decisions about what kind of marketing campaigns we were doing. As we're based in New York, so we were doing subway, billboards, train, bus stops, online ads, obviously Google ads, page search, all these kinds of things. And we weren't sure where our leads were coming from. And we had, just give you an example, like, some leads were unattributable, others, like we were making decisions in the dark. Like, for example, if you have somebody that sees the billboard and then they're riding on the bus, they see a bus ad, and then they're, seeing a website, it comes up on a Google ad, search on the side. And then, then they see a bus ad again. They're like, oh, you know what? I really want to call those guys at Freedom Care. So they Google Freedom Care, comes up at the top of page search. Oh, look, a Google AdWords search. That's what it's attributable to. And then that's something sort of to do with it, but we were at the top of the SEO results anyway. So like, we don't really know where our leads were coming from. I'm sure it's something that people can relate to. And so we're just kind of making decisions in the dark. And we were all figuring out marketing for the first time, like most startups. We're not like professional serial entrepreneurs where we started 8 businesses before. We were, like most startups, you may have, been installing HVAC, or you were a great coder, or you're a great, whatever it is, graphic designer, marketer. So you go out and do it on your own. So, marketing, coding, construction, whatever it is that you do, but you don't know what it's like to, what it means to run a business. And there's a lot of elements to that you just don't have a background in. And rather than, and you can only learn so much, as much as you hustle. So you hit the ceiling because of that. You don't have anybody on board that's actually done this before. It's not like we were the first business that tried to attribute their leads so we could make educated decisions about marketing. Talk about the onboarding process. I mean, we were growing and we're like hiring people, and then but nobody has time for anything because everybody was so busy. So the managers, team members, they would just throw new people in to just sit with other people that were already doing it. There was no written processes. There's no training program. There's no onboarding process because we're growing too fast to do all of that. So we ended up discovering that a lot of the new people would start off and just not have a very successful feeling at the beginning of their time with us. And again, when you're in startup phase, your first few people, it's like the excitement of startup mode. But people that join a year or two in, or, when you're already 50, 60 people or whatever, it doesn't have that same romance for them as it did for the first few founders and the first few people on board. So we started hitting issues. But again, we had never built teams this big before. We never had none of us had ever run a company the size of the one we were now running. And so we faced all kinds of challenges. We kind of had this instinct that our processes were not efficient or where there could be better. I mean, they're very efficient in certain ways, but we just felt like it could be better. It could be a lot better. And so we didn't know, so what do we do? Well, we hired a consultant, a process consultant. So we came in, spent tens of thousands of dollars, spent weeks and weeks, probably, pretty much full time, meeting dozens and dozens of people, documenting all of our processes, wrote us a 60, 70 page tome explaining all the ways that we can improve things. And with all that money that we paid and all the effort that we put into the process, we ended up ignoring virtually everything he wrote and said. Maybe we met with him about his proposal also, but we ended up ignoring virtually all of it. Because in the end, we had felt like, hey, he doesn't really know us. He doesn't really know our business. He doesn't know our clients. He doesn't really understand. And so, they weren't part of our team. There's only so much you could learn from a few weeks compressed discovery process. So, it just ended up being frustrating. And I only learned later on after joining this, after leaving this company, about this fractional leadership concept, this fractional executive leadership concept. I'll talk about that in a second, but a couple of other pieces of context from my background is that at this company, we used something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's one of a number of kind of operating systems in the sense that not a piece of software, but it's a method, a framework for small and mid-sized businesses running themselves. It gives them a structure for the way they do things, because otherwise you end up just having to reinvent the wheel. But it's not like any of your businesses are the first ones that have been invented. There are a lot of businesses out there. There's 4 or 5 million small and mid-sized businesses between 10 and 250 people in the United States alone. So so EOS is one way of saying okay, look, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's a waste of time and energy. Just skip all the experimentation, skip the stuff that works for tens of thousands of other businesses. And so we used EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is important for some context that we really liked it. And I definitely work with a lot of businesses that also use EOS. I created, after I left, a fractional integrator firm. Fractional integrator is a term that basically means fractional or part-time COO, Chief Operating Officer. And that integrator is an EOS terminology. So we're working with businesses that use the EOS management framework. And, so I and several other fractional integrators that work with me provide those services to people. So definitely have a lot of personal experience with being with fractional leadership as a person who does fractional leadership, as well as with my clients. We hire other fractional leaders. So, we need somebody in the finance seat. We need a CFO who can't afford somebody full time. So we bring in a fractional CFO or a fractional CMO or other things. And so I've hired lots of fractional leaders. So I understand how it works from both sides of the coin. I also have a podcast called Win-Win, an Entrepreneurial Community. It's a little bit about my background. But what I kind of introduced a little bit already is this concept of the entrepreneurial catch. I see there are stuff in the chat box, but I'm not seeing the pop-ups. So I trust that Jason or Yev will pipe in if there's something I need to know.
Yeah, it's just about the EOS framework, but you might be
Okay.
covering that anyways throughout.
Yeah, well, I wasn't planning to go deep into it. If you want to wait till the Q&A, or if you think it's not that important for context of understanding fractional leadership. So, I'm happy to go into it now if people think that makes a lot of sense. Definitely want to do what adds the most value for people. But since it's not integral, I think, to understanding the concept of fractional leadership, I might want to leave it for the conversation period at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Entrepreneurial Catch 22 is simply what I call this concept that that you get past that startup phase. We described it a little bit before. You're big enough. You're big enough to need experienced, been there, done that leadership, but you're not big enough to be able to afford that kind of person full time. Basically, like those examples I gave from my experience at Freedom Care. I mean, would have been nice to have a fractional COO or chief people person who who could have taught us, who's been there, done that, that's seen all this 10 times before. It's built businesses like ours, bigger than ours before, so they could just help become part of our leadership team, not be like that drive-by consultant that just kind of goes in and doesn't really understand us, kind of comes in and comes out, what I call drive-by consulting. I apologize. I know some of our hosts are consultants as well. I even call my business Wolf-Stitch Consulting, so maybe I shouldn't diss it, but I'm sure many of you are consultants. So I hope that I didn't just ruin my place with this audience. But anyway, the consultant comes in and out. There's a finite project, but sometimes you need somebody that's not just for one project or two projects, but that's part of your leadership team, that's been there, that's done that, so you could go to, they've seen this before, and they can help you skip past all of the pain and agony and slow experimentation and working things out for yourself. Like, I just say that phrase is really apt. You're just literally reinventing the wheel. There's no need for it. You can bring people on for a fraction of the cost of full time, because you can't afford that yet anyway. Sometimes you also don't want the risk or the significant ramp up time of a full-time hire, and you can get somebody like that for a period of time to be part of your leadership team on a regular basis for strategic leadership as a fractional leader. Again, it's that entrepreneurial catch 22 you're stuck in. At some point, you start really suffering from the fact that you don't have people who've done this before on your team, whether it's in marketing, sales, operations, finance, or technology. But again, it doesn't make any sense to pay the 250, 300,000, whatever it is going to end up being in your market for somebody full time with that kind of experience. So you end up just doing without, which is you just continue suffering from, or sometimes you end up hiring somebody with an inflated title, because startups, we give out titles like candy. So somebody with an inflated title or not the right experience, not enough background really doing this before. So you end up hiring somebody at a much lower price point, and then really continuing to suffer because they don't really actually have been there, done that experience. So with the idea of a fractional leader, what the heck is fractional leadership, right? So the idea of a fractional leader is you have somebody that you can afford who has done this before and has done it at a high level. So you're not kind of getting somebody like you have to do when you're looking at full-time very often, which is an underqualified person, which doesn't help you that much, and you end up still struggling just as much. Now I'm having to manage that person too, because they don't really get it, and trying to pull them along, and you don't know any better. So it's the blind leading the blind. You end up in a bad situation when you hire an underqualified person full-time because you can't afford them. So fractional leadership allows you to hire that fully qualified person who actually has been there and done that for a fraction of what it would cost for full-time. I'll get into some examples of some of these things about how it works in a few minutes. But I'll give an example that maybe some of you guys can relate to. There was a firm, one of the people I interviewed for the book told me about, called Nemo Media Group. It was a marketing firm, digital marketing firm, and they were at the point where they were 6 people, and they hired, or not hired, but they retained Leah Leaves from Alderaan Enterprises, if anybody gets the Star Wars references there. But she has a fractional COO firm specifically for marketing agencies, and she, the founder of this firm of 6 people hired her because the problem was that he was in everything. I'm sure you guys can relate to this too. Like, he was in the marketing, he was in the delivery of services, he was in finance, he was in everything, and he was a bottleneck to everything. I mean, he wanted his customers to have the greatest experience and the highest quality work, and he was the best at getting clients and making the sales. So he was just in everything. He had a few helpers, a few people that were helping, but he was in everything. He became the bottleneck for everything. He tremendously slowed everything down. It was not scalable. And again, he hadn't built something even that big before, so he wasn't sure what to do. And so he said, well, he also can't afford a $200,000-$300,000 COO, as you can imagine, at a 6-person company. So he retained a fractional COO, Leah Leaves, and she came in, and the first couple of months she worked with them. And again, she's worked with all these marketing firms before. She's done this many times before. She knows exactly what to do. So she came in, and she was able to, obviously with respect for their unique client, their unique product, their unique service, with understanding that she'll never understand like their unique clients, but there are certain commonalities among these small and mid-sized businesses. So she was able to take what she knows works from other similar types of agencies and develop processes and procedures that would give them the kind of high touch experience that their clients wanted, but without having the founder to be having his fingers in everything. She was able to development opportunities for the members of the team so that they felt not just that they were working with their heads down like crazy, but also were getting to grow from the experience and felt like they were becoming better and they were being leveled up through their work at this company. And so it made people more loyal and more happy and more fulfilled and more like they were advancing their own careers. So they were a lot more invested in what they were doing together. They set up incentives for like good work and profit. And she set up an incentive program, even though it's a small company, but she set it up an incentive program and was able to, again, to improve things greatly. She obviously sees where all the inefficiencies are. She sees what works, what doesn't work. So she was able to make them a lot more efficient. And over her first 8 months there, I think at the time I interviewed her about this, it was 8 months into her engagement with them. And at that point, they had gone from 6 people to 18 people. They had doubled their revenue, but interestingly, they also increased their net profit margin, which is important because obviously you bring in all these extra people. Very often you could kind of eat away all of your profit when you're doing that if you're not doing it in a smart way. So she was able to, again, she knows how to do that, how to maximize profit while maximizing effectiveness and efficiency and happiness and satisfaction among the team. So she's able to help them do that because, again, she's done this before. It's not magic. It's not pixie dust, right? It's simply been there, done that experience, and strong profit. So that's the story I want to tell about that. But that's the basic idea of fractional leadership. So the question is, okay, let's say, okay, that's the kind of general concept. It's a fraction of their time for a fraction of the cost of somebody who's an experienced executive. Again, whether in marketing, sales, operations, finance, technology. I'm operations. I'm a fractional integrator, like a fractional COO, also not for marketing companies specifically, but all kinds of companies. And so let's see, 526, or maybe shoot for 540 at least for the presentation portion. So time commitments. So what kind of time commitment do they generally speak with you? A lot of this varies great. A lot of this stuff varies greatly. It's very specific to the engagement and to the needs of the client and to the proven process that each fractional leader, fractional executive uses. But a time commitment is the first element. That could be that they spend 4 hours a week with you, about half a day a week with you, a day a week with you. Some, particularly for the smaller companies and fractional leaders who have experience with smaller companies, not as much the larger companies. Sometimes they may do a day and a half, 2 days, 2.5 days, sometimes even 3 days a week with one client. But that's more in the smaller companies where there's a tactical element, also getting a lot of work done too, not just providing strategic leadership. But the time commitment is, again, it's, and some of them could be 2 half days a month, like with your CFO. It really varies very greatly. But the idea is that they're becoming part of your leadership team. They're not just a consultant who's there for a finite project, but there's somebody who's becoming for an indefinite period of time. And when I say indefinite, I don't mean forever, but it's for a temporary but indefinite period of time. So we'll talk about length of engagement in a minute. So how much does it cost? Most fractional leaders that I've talked to have a retainer model. I personally have a retainer model for my firm as well. So you pay a monthly retainer, you know what you're getting every month. And for that retainer, you get either a certain number of hours that they're going to spend with you per week or per month, or it could be that they're just going to define certain accountabilities that they're going to be providing for you on an ongoing basis. So it's more about the deliverables, the value that you're getting, not so much about the number of hours that you're spending. And so there are, I mentioned hourly or retainer on the presentation. There are some who do it hourly as well. There's some who bill hourly. We definitely know those who do that. I don't particularly like it, but there are those who do that. Even if I don't like it personally. You define accountabilities, deliverables. Obviously, it's critical to define what do you expect to be getting from this person? What are they going to be doing for you or with you? And that's obviously critical to be clear on that. One of the aspects that's important to understand about fractional leadership is that these people are able to give you their highest and best value for you is their strategic leadership, not their tactical get or done type of extra set of hands. It's a really, really good deal financially relative to the strategic leadership that they could give you and what you would pay for that, again, relative to full-time. But it's really way too much to pay for an extra set of hands very often. So there's a little bit of a middle ground, as I hinted at a few minutes ago, particularly with much smaller companies like that example I gave you. You have some that are like a mix of strategic leadership and getting stuff done. And that's more with the smaller companies and fractional leaders whose experience also is with smaller companies. And that could be that is the right fit for in many instances. But most fractional leaders, fractional executives, if you just look at the full spectrum, are working at somewhat larger organizations, more than 20 people, and very often are focused, and the highest and best use is focused on strategic things, because that's what you're missing, right? Your people, your managers, your team members, you can get stuff done. It's just a question of what stuff should you be getting done, and like what's the format of the processes within which you are getting that stuff done. That's what you're missing. And that's what you need to been there, done that person for, not for just getting things done. So I point out that it's important to think of fractional leadership as a strategic resource, as a leadership resource, rather than primarily as a tactical resource or someone to get stuff done. One aspect to consider about how it works is whether the person's going to be on site or remote with you. And on site, obviously, is possible if you have, there's United States alone is 3,000 miles wide, and not sure exactly how tall it is, but it's pretty big. So to find the exact right fit fractional leader that will happen to be within the 10 to 15 square mile radius of your home base is not necessarily so likely. You're obviously more likely to find a right fit person for you if remote works, and we'll talk later on about that when we talk about, are you a right fit for fractional leadership? Are you a good candidate for it? Is it potentially appropriate for you, or would it not be appropriate for you? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But very often, probably the majority of time, fractional leadership engagements are remote. And I don't know if you guys have these questions bubbling up in your minds. Hey, how can that work? Someone's on your team, or they're leading your sales department or whatever, when they're not even there with them. I don't know if those kinds of questions are bubbling into your minds, but we could definitely talk about that in the Q&A if it is. Another thing to understand about how fractional leadership works is there's two basic models of the kinds of fractional leaders you might find. You might find that there are those who are part of firms, groups of fractional leaders that work together in one business, or there's all different kind of formats that people organize themselves in for those businesses and for those firms. But firms are one type. The other type is solo practitioners. People who are going solopreneurs themselves, just like you are or started off. And so those are, again, there's different pros and cons of working with different types, but you do find both firms and solo practitioners. that you can use if you want to get a fractional leader in your startup or in your company. Length of engagement, this can vary greatly. I would say on average it's somewhere between 6 months and 2 years on average. The goal of the engagement really is for people to work themselves out of a job. Fractional leaders feel most successful because why do they go into fractional leadership? Because they had jobs before, right? They were CFOs, CMOs, CTOs, COOs, whatever, heads of sales. They've done that before, multiple organizations. They're tired of just maintaining something. They don't want a job. That's why they're now working in a fractional leadership firm or started a solo practitioner business, because they don't want to just have a job. They don't want to just maintain. It's boring. They don't like it. So the goal here is to help you get to the point where your organization doesn't need them anymore, where you could scale big enough to be able to afford that full-time CFO or full-time CMO or COO who lives, eats, breathes your firm, your company, your organization. That is ultimately the goal. So their happiest point is when they can go after 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it happens to be, and help find or mentor and uplift somebody from within the organization to take over their role. And they can help you do that. That is not a failure. That's not like, an awkward moment. That's exactly the purpose of why they got in there. So length of engagement, like I said, can vary a lot. My shortest engagement, I would say, is about 6 months, where they actually had a full-time COO before I came in. I came in as an interim, helped them move the ball forward with the organization and help them with the process of finding a new full-time COO. I interviewed all the candidates, helped advise them on the process, helped transition and train that person in after they started. And that was about a 6-month engagement. Others I've had that are, upwards of 2 years. And I kind of said to them after almost 2 years with one client, I'm just kind of tweaking. I'm like, you guys did a great job. They hired 3 other leadership team members after I came on board. They have a nice, robust leadership team. I didn't want to let me go. But I kind of felt like we're just tweaking now. Like, you guys are doing a great job. Maybe it's time for me to move on. And we ended up finding one of the members of the leadership team. We looked at everybody and thought, do we need to look from outside? Can we find somebody inside? And we found one member of the leadership team at that company. It was a tech company. They had a head of product. And we ended up making him the COO and kind of working with him to figure out how are they going to delegate more of the stuff going on in the product department and enable him to free up some more time so that he could be essentially the fractional integrator, the fractional COO, while he spent 80% of his time doing head of product stuff. So that was, a couple of examples about how it works from beginning to end. The next question is, okay, let's say, I don't know if this is something for you right now, if you're listening or watching this, or this might be something that you would consider later on. Hey, just kind of put this in my toolbox, put this on my mind for when I need it, for when it's the right time. Either way, when it is the right time, I want to offer 5 questions that will help you determine whether you're a good fit for this, or whether it's probably going to end in failure if you would force yourself and try to do it. So the 5 questions are you looking for strategic leadership or an extra set of hands? As I said before, the main value of people and what you're really paying for in your investment with them is their experience, their ability to lead an entire organization, in the case of COOs or fractional integrators, or particular parts of the organization like marketing, sales, finance, technology, is they've done this before. They have experience, they have knowledge, they have strategy, they have leadership that they could bring to you and help guide and lead and manage the team members under them in that department. So that's their main use for you. If you're just looking for another set of hands, you just need more work done, maybe we should look at a lower level kind of hire that you would still have to manage, but a lower level kind of hire, maybe a manager level kind of hire you might want to consider. Do you already have team members who are remote, especially leadership team members, whatever you consider leadership team in your organization? Do you already have leadership team members that are remote? If you do, then obviously not all fractional leadership engagements are remote. In fact, I have 2 at the moment. I have a max of 2, and both of my clients right now are in person. But I've had those that are virtual before. Most of the time it's virtual, but not always. Like I said, there are many who do it in person, even fractionally. But very often it is remote, and it's easier to find the right person if it's remote. And you may not find a right person if you need it to be local. So with that being said, I ask you, do you already have any members of the leadership team remote? Maybe your whole company is remote. Maybe your whole leadership team is remote, or you have 1 or 2 members that are remote. If so, then it's not a big deal to bring in one more remote person. If, however, everybody's like always in one place, like the whole leadership team are always together, always physical, always in one place, and then you're going to have like one guy or gal kind of zooming in and is the only one, and people get in these sidebar conversations, and they're just going to be left out, and they're not even there. Again, they're not even there full-time remote, they're there part-time remote. So it's just kind of, it's kind of hard to make that work. For if you know that you need it and it's really important to you, I think there are ways to make it work. I mean, for instance, you can have your meetings where everybody's on Zoom, even if 4 of you are in one location and one is in some other location. But that puts everybody on the same playing field. There's ways of making it work if you wanted to. So if you know that you need this, if you know the person you find is the best fit, and you're really dedicated to it, then you can make it work for sure. And it does work sometimes like that. But it's just, I want to make people aware that's a little bit of an uphill battle, and you have to be very intentional about making it work if everybody's in one place physically. Are you somebody who can trust outside voices, who can trust outside experts? If there's a terminology called terminal uniqueness. I don't know if any of you have heard this terminology before, but it's this idea that you think that you're one of a kind. I mean, you are one of a kind. We're all snowflakes in a certain way, but you think that nobody's like you, nobody can understand you, no organization's like yours, nothing that works for anybody else can ever work for you. And whether you intellectually think that or it's just you emotionally think that, if that's your attitude, then any outside person, I mean, maybe somebody's gonna have to be full-time with you for a year or 2 before you start to trust them. I mean, if that's the case, then you're, whatever, you just may not get the full value from it if you don't listen to anything they say, or you're not willing to listen and learn, if you don't have kind of like a humble inquiry sort of attitude. And if you suffer from terminal uniqueness. I would say though that, look, it's not the case that fractional leaders, just in general, I'm speaking generally, they're not coming in and kind of imposing some sort of outside idea of what your organization should work like by fiat. I mean, most of the time, they're also coming in with an attitude of humble inquiry, with an attitude of knowing that no one understands your customers and your particular process and your own personal core values and your team's personal core values and your culture and your people. No one understands that like you. And so what their value is they're able to take that and channel it, along with all the stuff that they know works, and systems and processes and experience with the market, et cetera, and channel that into a way that works a lot more effectively than what you were able to do before, just because you haven't done this before at the scale that you want to do it at now, or that you are already doing it. The other point is, are you somebody, and this is a general question, it's not unique to fractional leadership, but are you somebody who can commit to reinforcing other people, or reinforcing the other members of your leadership team and what they are tasked to do? If they are responsible for sales, and again, this is really for all of your team members, not just fractional leaders, but if whoever it is that you have in charge of your sales or your marketing or your operations or your engineering or your finance or whatever department, or your tech department or CTO or your development department, if those people's team members are always like running to you when they don't like the answer that they get or the policy that they're getting from their supervisor, their manager, or you're running to them to say like, hey, you're like going around them and saying, hey, do this, do this, do that, then you're undermining your ability to create a scalable organization. You're undermining the morale of your people. You're undermining the morale of your leaders. And it's ultimately an unhealthy thing to do. And certainly with fractional leadership, and I'm pointing out here because if someone's only working with you about a day a week and you're kind of can have them all to yourself, you can tell them all the things to ignore that you got your fractional leader to work on with them. on the day a week that they're spending together, then obviously that's going to be an issue. It's going to mean that he or she, you're going to be kind of setting him up for failure. So that's a problem. And obviously, last is, can you afford it? Is it in your budget? I didn't talk about the exact cost before. Again, it varies wildly. I would say, for example, on the fractional COO side, I see some that are kind of in the $4,000 a month range for per day a week that they spend with you, on the low end for the very small organizations and who have experience with very small organizations, and as much as 12 or 15,000 a month for the same time commitment, basically about a day a week. Could be as much as 12 or 15,000 a month for people who have different kind of experience with larger organizations like yours, or like the ones that you want yours to be like. So it really varies wildly. Similar thing on the fractional CFO front. I know some fractional CFO firms that charge about I guess you could look at it as $2,500 a day, right? They'll charge you about $2,500 a month for about a day a week with you. So you could do that as one day a month. You could do that as 2 half days a month. That's at the very low end, around 2,500. And that could go up to, again, to, $10,000 or $12,000 a month for about a day a week, or anything in between. Or you could have 4 half days a month at 5,000, or 2 days a month at 5,000, whatever, something, various permutations like that. Just gives you some ideas in terms of those who do bill hourly. Just really want to throw all the facts on the ground here for you guys, just to give you a picture of what it's like. Is that, let's say for those who do hourly, again, it really just depends on the market, depends on where depends on the market, where your local market is or where their local market is. It depends on the level of experience they have. If they're, kind of ran an 8-person company, or ran a team at an 8 or 10-person company, or they ran a team at a 150 or 500-person company, obviously it's going to make a difference in terms of what their rates are. But it could really go from, let's say 125 an hour for those who charge hourly to a lot more, 300 or more per hour. That is that. So again, you have to ask yourself, with having in mind what it costs, can you afford it? It's a simple question. Obviously, if you can't, there's no point in wasting your time or theirs. But let's say for one or more of these 5 reasons, you're not a candidate for fractional leadership. You can't, take advantage of all the great things that I've said about what fractional leadership as a tool, as a model can do for you if you just choose to use it. And if you're not a candidate, so what are your options? What do you do then? I mean, you still are in the entrepreneurial catch 22, right? You still are suffering because you don't have someone who's been there, done that experience. And you can't really scale without that person, but you can't afford that person until after you scale. So what do you do? One is you could just continue doing what you're doing now, which is suffering and just figuring out on your own and doing the best you can and working 80 hours a week, and and just kind of continue muddling through until you can kind of muddle through till you can get big enough that you can afford a fractional leader or a full-time person. So that's one option. Another way is you just recognize that this is so important. This is what you need. You want to do it. So you find the money, you borrow money, investors, whatever. And in such a case, then you end up putting someone full-time into a role that really is not a full-time role very often. So you'll end up obviously have to make sure they agree that they're taking on some other role in addition to their core executive role of finance, technology, whatever it happens to be. A lot of you guys are fundraising or looking to go to VC, whatever it is. So, you could take this into account as part of something that you want to do, even if you can't really justify it from the operating budget of the business, the operating cash of the business. You can find a way to do it. And then you'll have a few months or more where you're kind of paying more than you really have to. But, maybe if you're not a real candidate for fractional leadership, that's what you got to do. And it might be a good investment. The other thing you need to do is, again, a lot of times if you just really need more stuff getting done, or you just have like no leadership team, right? Let's say you're just the founder and you got a bunch of kind of workers, but none of them are really at the level where they can kind of own major functions of the business. You really have no leadership team, or you only have like maybe one other person on the leadership team. You really might need more. You might need more just tactical help, right? You might, instead of hiring a fractional leader, maybe what you need is more of a manager, more of somebody that's, kind of a level above the frontline workers, whatever that means for you, and hire more of a manager level person. That could very often be, oh shoot, it's 5:47. I need to wrap up. The hire a manager level person, or again, hire consultants, maybe 1 or 2 projects. They could do something more finite. I'll just quickly go through this part, which is, okay, let's say you are a candidate for fractional leadership. What can you do to find somebody? So first of all, you need to get clear on what kind of fractional leader you need, whether it's marketing, sales, operations, finance, or technology. Secondly is be clear about any particular industry experience that they need, if they need that. Sometimes people are able to kind of use transferable skills. Like I've worked in a variety of fields that I had no background in, and it was great. But sometimes you need somebody to avoid a huge learning curve that might exist in your particular industry. So be clear about whatever industry experience that person needs to have. Be clear about what accountabilities you need from them, so that you're not kind of shopping for something you don't even know what you need. And if you can get some idea of what kind of time commitment that might take, although what you think it might take could be higher or lower than what it is in reality, but get an idea of that and get an idea of what you can actually afford to pay. Because, just again, no sense in wasting your time or theirs if their rates are beyond what you could afford. In terms of resources, where do you go if you need to find a fractional leadership? Well, a leader, well, first thing I would say is go to my website, right? fractionalleadership.io. Check that out, because what I've built is a community of vetted fractional leaders. So I have a vetted fractional leader platform. Go to fractionalleadership.io, click on business owners. You'll get some more information there about what fractional leadership is, how it works. And then there's an easy button to simply request a vetted fractional leader referral, and we'll connect you with somebody. And we'll connect you with 2 to 3 people within 2 business days. You can find somebody that's good. That way you're not just kind of shooting in the dark and doing the very, 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 very manual process of searching on Google and taking notes on all kinds of websites that very often don't have all the information you need to know. Plus, you don't know if they really are what they say they are, since you don't know anybody who's used them before. So we are vetting them. So we're talking to 3 or more of their actual clients before making a referral. There's other resources like Interim Execs, Bolster, Fractional, Perio, etc. That you can, again, you could use search fractional leadership or fractional executive, fractional CFO. You'll see these guys come up. Those are also good resources, and just good old Google, right? That's the best way to find a fractional leader. So with that, I know it's not 20 minutes, but it's 11 minutes that we have left, and I'll let Jason.
Yeah. No, that was perfect. Yeah, I just sent a message in the chat. We're opening up the Q&A now, so you can either submit it in the chat if you have a question, or raise your hand on the reaction item. Happy to kick it off with couple questions here. And so, as you're on the other side of the table, as you're coming at this from, a fractional leader yourself, like let's say, for example, you have 1 slot left to work with a new company, and they check all the boxes of, they're able to hire you, they need, they're open to feedback, they're looking for a leader like yourself. Like, what are some of the criteria, if you have 5 companies you're choosing from for the next spot to work with, that you'd be looking for in the business?
I guess I would say the biggest thing is a core values fit. I mean, this applies to the business owners, something you guys should be thinking about as well, is core values fit. I just can't tell you, if people are, if you're obsessive about like your customers, a customer obsession is one of your core values, or, like beast mode work, that if someone like doesn't email you back within 5 minutes, if you email them at 2 a.m., that you get really upset. Like, you have to be kind of in the same vibe, in the same mindset or similar mindset with the people you're working with. Just like the members of your team, you want to make sure the same thing with any fractional leader you're working with, or same thing when I'm thinking about working with a client. If you're talking with somebody, if I'm talking with a business owner, or if you are talking with a fractional leader, somebody you're interviewing, and you feel friction, like you have an hour conversation and you feel it's just a high friction interaction, like is misunderstanding, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to go. There's a good hint that they're, even if they're a great company, they're very successful, or a great fractional leader, very successful, but maybe an indication that they're just not a good fit for you personally. I mean, you need to like personally get along because they're gonna be a member of your leadership team. You want to like them, and and really feel like you guys are in sync with each other on what's important to you and how you like to work. Again, if you're like if you're a group of people that are like super attention to detail and super like obsessive about every detail, and then you get if you get your emails even in the courting process from a fractional leader, it's like full of typos and it's like all like lowercase beginning sentences and all this stuff. You could tell I'm kind of particular about these sorts of things, but like then it's just like you're going to be nothing if not like annoyed all the time at them just from this kind of stuff. So like you just need to be sure that you're aligned with whoever you're working with on either side of the table in core values.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And then, we had a question from Serge as well on how do you manage the security and trade secrets in relation with the fractional leader that you bring on?
So it's a great question. I think it would be kind of similar to how you would do it with a regular employee. First of all, you have them sign an NDA. I mean, that's number one. And number two, you have to just practice the same kind of security protocols that you would do otherwise. If you're super high security, maybe you say they can only work on your stuff if they're working on an RDS that's on your server. So that they're only working on your stuff on your server. It never goes to anything outside your system. That's one way you could do it. Obviously, you could have say that all work they need to do with you has to be on an email address that you provide. There's different ways you could do it. SharePoint, Microsoft. I mean, there's all kinds of security systems, and whatever. You shouldn't lower your security standards for a fractional leader that you're working with. So I would just say to loop them, just fold them into whatever your standard security protocols are, and of course have an NDA.
Great. And do you consider, a lot of our audience is founders of startup companies. So if you're taking a fractional role with a startup, would this be something, they would put their fractional leadership team on as part of the management team when they're pitching investors?
Very often that's one of the biggest sells, right, of having a fractional leader is that maybe you're paying $12,000 a month for the CFO that's with you half a day a week, or less. I know people that are paying $15,000 for an hour or two a week of some people's time. That's not really fractional leadership; it's more consulting. But sometimes their relationships or their name or their pedigree is maybe not the whole reason you want them on board, but it's definitely a plus. And so definitely if they're your CFO, if they're your COO, and they're from Harvard or they were at some, they came from SAP or some cool company. I mean, for sure, milk it for all it's worth. They are on your leadership team. So you wouldn't really treat them any different than a full-time member of your leadership team. That's why I call it fractional leadership, right? They're not just a consultant. That's the whole point, is that they're with you on an ongoing basis, helping you lead the company. They're in your leadership team meetings every week or whatever your structure is. So they are legitimately members of your leadership team. They're just not full-time. So, go for it.
Yeah. And then since you have, you have your platform now that's connecting the inquiries with the right leadership teams to join. What are some of the factors you look at in figuring out like who the right match is? And don't give us all of your secrets, but are there some characteristics that are definitely taken into account when you try to figure out who to match with?
Yeah, it's nothing, again, it's nothing super magical. It's kind of the things that you would expect, where again, if you're looking, that stuff I told you to think about before you look for a fractional leader, that's stuff I look at. I mean, not the only things, but is there a particular industry, is industry experience particularly relevant for this search? If so, do the people that we're considering referring, do they have that industry experience? It's an obvious example. We look at company size a lot, because if the company that's making the search has got 20 people and there's a particular fractional leader we might think about who's been at 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 person companies, it could be a match, but very often it's not. You want people that are kind of in sync with, like, they understand. Just because they were at a big company doesn't mean that they're going to be good at being your fractional CFO at a very small company, because there's a different way that things work at a smaller, scrappy startup than at a big company. It's just different. So if someone doesn't really get that because they've only been in the big corporate world, that's not necessarily going to be a good fit. And by the same token, if somebody's, if you're looking for a fractional CMO and you're a 250 person company, then somebody that's only been a fractional CMO for 20-person companies, again, I'm going to be very skeptical that that's going to be a good fit. So I look at company size. We've got 3 minutes left. What's some other example? I mean, those are some examples. I'd say there's more, but that's a little bit of it.
Yeah, sounds good. And then, question. So do you ever see, it might depend a little bit if you're a fractional company or you're an individual, but do you see fractional shifting to full-time roles?
Well, like I said, usually people go into fractional because they like that and they're tired of doing full-time. So it's I would say majority of the time people are not open to it. I mean, whenever anybody's brought it up to me, I'm like, nope. What about nope? Yeah, but what if we nope? Like I'm not interested in going to full-time and being up all days and hours. Like
you're already doing what you want to do.
For just one company, and then getting into maintenance mode after you build because you're still in the same place, and also taking the pay cut because obviously relative to the number of hours you're working, you're getting paid more in fractional than you are full-time, because again, you're taking the risk of you have to fill your client load. So obviously the relative payment, if you converted it to per hour, is a lot higher in fractional. So but that being said, it does sometimes happen. People love each other. They're like, oh, I love this company. These are the greatest people in the world. And so it definitely happens. But I would say it's a minority of the time.
Awesome. Great presentation here. Enjoyed all the audience questions as well. And I mean, you have my next question up here on the screen already. I was going to ask where we should follow for more information and stay up to date on everything you're doing, but looks like your website and emails up there.
Yeah, reach out to me by email. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Go to the website. Again, you could find a fractional leader there, very easy, and get more information there as well. Pick up my book also if you just want to understand this better. Fractional Leadership, Landing Executive Talent You Thought Was Out of Reach. We'll copy here. And just pick up this book. It's on Amazon, on hardback, paperback, and it'll be in about 6 weeks on Audible as well.
Oh, perfect.
It's Kindle also.
Yeah, no, great. Everyone should definitely check it out there. We'll send out a link as part of the YouTube recording and to our follow-up newsletter as well, to check out both your website, the book, and other resources there. So appreciate everybody sticking on with us. Definitely check out, stay up to date. Make sure you're on our newsletter at startupgrind.com/Boston. If you signed up for the event, you should probably be on there automatically now. But we'll be having more events like these, a combination of webinars and in person, and we're here to help if there's anything else we can support with on your startup company.
And thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.